we will look at Lewis Hamilton, of course, matching the record of Michael Schumacher, a 7th championship win. And what a way to do it. Sam, where does this one rank amongst Hamilton's best victories in F1?
It's hard. It's hard to rank them, but he's been bloody incredible, hasn't he? And I'm not going to lie, lads. I had a little bit of a cry when he crossed the line. When you follow someone from their junior career, yeah, correct. call me what you want. When you follow someone from their junior career and you watch them achieve so much, and you think Schumacher is set a pedestal that no one will ever meet, and then you get to watch it live happening. And seeing that emotional response from Lewis, hearing him cry over the radio, it is one of those things that you don't think you'll get to see in the sport that you love. And we've seen it twice in the space of 20 years. It was just incredible scenes. And this is up there, that drive today, that the race on its own was up there, I think, in some of his best drives of all time. I think that was an incredible performance from him. One of the few people to not make a single error all race long. Perez, pretty much the other person. I think they both made the same error going deep into turn 9. They had to run over the off-road bit and go around the bollard. But that was pretty much it. He has been spectacular this season. Bottas, we'll get on to the race performance, but this season has been a bit unlucky at times, but also just, again, not up to the consistent standard that Lewis Hamilton puts down. And he said in his post-race interview, I feel like I'm just getting started, and I feel like I'm just getting better and better, which, for the ears of the rest of the grid, must be absolutely terrifying and heartbreaking all in one go, because are you ever going to get a championship while this man is on the grid? It was incredible, and I think this really does rate highly among the championships he's won. There's been some real treacherous conditions all season long. He's had to really come over things mentally, politically, culturally, and on the track, and he's done it. He's conquered it once again and proven why he should be, in terms of accolades now, the most successful Formula One driver of all time, and joint with Michael Schumacher on the World Championships. It is just brilliant to witness. I am really quite happy that we get to say that we were there in the moment when it happened. It was wonderful.
Harry, where do you think this one ranks amongst his best races? And just as a season as a whole, how do you think Hamilton's coped with 2020?
He's right. This says a lot about his performances. I don't think it's his best, but that says a lot, because I think he's had even better than that, which is just ridiculous. Because today was another example of just how good he is. I don't think the Mercedes all weekend, it didn't look like a car that was going to trouble maybe even the podium. Even on the dry tyres in Friday practice, they didn't seem to have the pace. But yeah, you never rule him out. I think we said this on the preview podcast. You can't rule out, Lewis Hamilton ever. And today was another example of this. As for the season, is it his best season? That's tough. That's a difficult one. It's quite possibly. I think last year it also rivals it. But as Sam said, there's been so much else going on this year. So for him to stay as focused and as committed as he has been, is impressive. There's no other word for it. And deep down, my Schumacher fanboy in me, it hurts. It hurts a lot. But all I can do is you just respect to the man, give it to the man, because he's just that good. And if Schumacher was around to speak to other people, then I'm sure he would say the same. So you can't be mad at it at all. So congrats, Mr. LH.
Yeah, I think it was an epic performance, and I think those that argue against that are probably looking at it the wrong way. It wasn't a faultless race, so I don't think it was his best race of all time. I certainly would still go back to Silverstone 08 in that respect, but it was a great result. There were a few errors in there, obviously going, running on lap 1, left the circuit, had lost positions as well against Albon when he went too deep into the corner trying to overtake Sebastian Vettel. That was a bit of a silly move. So it wasn't faultless from Lewis Hamilton, but by and large, this was a race where the keys to victory were patience, consistency, and avoiding big errors. And he ticked all three in that respect. And With Lewis Hamilton, we often see with Mercedes, obviously the dominant position that they're in, there can quite often be occasions where he's not able to perhaps showcase his talents in a way where he doesn't have to overtake cars. There are races where he starts from pole position and he dominates the race from there. And it can occasionally make people question, okay, when conditions aren't right, can he still get the job done? Because it's not something he has to do very regularly. But races like this prove that the answer is yes, he definitely still can get it done, because this win was not just in jeopardy, this win was very unlikely for the first half of the race. And Hamilton had to show something different. He had to show that he can be patient. He can wait behind these cars, and he knows that the race is going to come to him in the second half, and ultimately it did. So fair play to him. Tyre management proved key, and we know that is one of Hamilton's strengths. I think it says a lot that Hamilton and Perez finished 1 and 2. I don't think that's a coincidence in the slightest. Tyre management was definitely of the highest order, and Hamilton did a great job making those tyres last all the way from, I think it was lap 8 that he made his one and only pit stop. We saw the tyre condition at the end of the Grand Prix. He was practically running on slicks. So he did a very good job of managing those tyres, deserves a lot of respect. He was able to make it count when he needed to, which is the mark of all great champions. I think what was very interesting about this Grand Prix was how we had a mixture of guys who were quick in full wet conditions, but not quite there in the changeable damp conditions, and vice versa. So, as an example, the Mercedes were not there in terms of the full wet conditions, but by the time we got to intermediate conditions and more dry conditions, they were on it again. And that seemed to be the case with the McLaren as well. It was very interesting to see the mixture, because you also had Racing Point and I would say Red Bull, possibly Alfa Romeo as well, who were very strong in the wet conditions, but once it started to dry out, they just couldn't compete. We saw that Lance Stroll finished well over a minute off the pace of Lewis Hamilton, where you wouldn't have predicted that halfway through the Grand Prix. So he let the conditions come to him, didn't make any stupid errors prior to that, and he deserves a lot of respect. It's been a great year as well, from first race to last. Bottas had a plan, not sure what that plan is now. Perhaps he's going down the Trump route and going to try and challenge it in court or something, because that's the only way Bottas has got a chance now. But yeah, consistency. That's been Hamilton's last 3 years. That's what he's made him so good.
Just look forward ahead to when we go back to Australia next season. And Bottas wins it, as he seems to often do on the radio the moment he crosses the line. Stop the count! Stop the count! That'll be it. That'll be the moment where Bottas thinks he's claimed the title, and that'll all he want to do. 23 races. No, thank you. I'll have the one. That's the only way you can do it.
Valtteri Bottas wins the Formula One season with 25 points. It's going to be groundbreaking in 21, guys. Speaking of 21, we did have Mark Webber's conversation with Lewis Hamilton on the podium about what his future holds. We've already brought up the statement that he said that he feels like he's only starting to get there, which is quite frankly terrifying. We had a discussion earlier on in the week as to whether we think there is a chance he could move out of Formula One, leave on top. Harry, do you think there's any chance of that now, or is Hamilton well in his groove?
I don't know. I watched the thing with Mark Webber, and I was a bit, the first bit when he said, just getting started, I was like, oh yeah, here we go. Incoming 3-year contract with Mercedes. But then the stuff he was saying afterwards about being within the sport and changing the sport, and there are lots of other things he wants to achieve, and none of that mentioned driving. And that's not to say he wouldn't still be driving at the same time. I just thought it was interesting. I still think he will be there next year. But yeah, I think I echo what I said last time, when I think there are other things maybe on Hamilton's mind now, and maybe he will remain in F1 but just not driving a car. Who knows? I doubt it. I think he will be driving, because that's the thing he loves doing the most. And why would he want to stop when he's being so good at it? So but it was definitely an interesting conversation with old Mac Webber. I don't know. I think it would be surprising, but there's a part of me that wouldn't be entirely shocked if he did call it a day. but I think he will be there in 21.
So I think if he retired now, there'd be no doubt whatsoever that his reputation would be completely intact. He would be retiring on the top of his game. And there would be questions forever as to what he could have achieved. Sam, do you think that his conversation with Webber, what he's achieved today, do you think that's swayed it one way or the other?
I mean, I think the thing with Lewis, I think he's set out as a driver. He's achieved as a driver what you want to achieve. He is, if you're going to look at records broken and numbers, he is the greatest of all time, right? If you're going to only take numbers into account, he has the records to back him up now. The only one he's now equal to is Schumacher with the championships, and all the other accolades theoretically put him in front of Schumacher. But I think Hamilton wants to achieve more. I think now Hamilton wants a legacy. And I think he almost spoke it into realization right at that moment with Mark Webber. Mark asked him, would there be an 8th, a 9th, a 10th, 11th? And Hamilton replied with, I want to make F1 carbon neutral. I want to improve the sport. I want to help the diversity. You hear me speaking up at every single Grand Prix. I want to be a voice in this sport. I don't think he'd say all these things so publicly if he was willing to just depart at the end of this season. Unless he was going to stick around as a mainstay face off the grid, but be in the paddock as part of the Mercedes team. I can't see him doing that when he's in the form of his life still. The fact that he's still growing as a driver, we're still seeing him produce breathtaking performances. He's still creating things that I don't think drivers at the absolute best of their careers would be able to create. I can't see him going anywhere. I think he will be here for at least one more season. And with the way he's speaking, I'd be shocked if he retires anytime soon. I would love to see him have a go in these new cars in the 2022 regs to see if he's able to do it again. I really would be surprised now if he announces some kind of retirement. There have to be something that really sways him to change what he's doing to not be in that seat for next season.
Yeah, I mean, just to look at it from the impact that he wants to make in terms of change, in terms of human rights, in terms of making F1 carbon neutral, I think this definitely does form a very significant part of his agenda, and I think it's something that he does want to push. I don't think it's something that he's just saying for face. The question is, how does he achieve these things? And honestly, I think his voice is most powerful when he is world champion. And he could transition into something else. He could transition into a role that is outside of a driver. We know he's already doing that in terms of Extreme E. But I think in terms of Formula One and that atmosphere, him leading the way as a driver, him being the world champion, being the representative of the sport, I don't think there is a better position that he could be in to express his views, to have his voice be heard, to be so influential. So I think he stays in F1 from that front. In terms of performance, if you look back at a few of the other greats and when they decided to walk away, or in a few cases when they were forced to walk away, I guess. If you're to look back at, say, Alain Prost, he retired as a world champion. If you were to look back at Ayrton Senna, of course, not his choice whatsoever, but he went out on top. He was still at his peak at the time that he unfortunately departed the sport. But then if you were to look at a more modern example, Michael Schumacher, of course, we saw what happened with Michael Schumacher, that I don't want to say he stayed in F1 too long, but his legacy, I don't think it was completely tarnished, far from it, but he came back and he wasn't the same Michael Schumacher. He could still bring it. He still brought Mercedes plenty of points, but he wasn't the same driver that won all those championships. And I feel as if that would be in the back of Hamilton's mind. If he overstays his welcome, maybe that could happen to him. It will happen to him if he stays in F1 for long enough. Age, no one's ever beaten it. And Hamilton's no different in that respect. So there has to be a right time for him to pack it in. But using Schumacher again as that comparison point, when he walked away for the first time at the end of 2006, I feel as if at that time, 2005, 2006, the Ferrari wasn't quite on the same pace that it was a few years ago, but Schumacher was already regressing somewhat. He was still an excellent driver at the end of 2006, but he wasn't quite at the peak of his powers. So I think he picked a very good time to walk away, the first point in his career. But if we're to look at Lewis Hamilton, I would argue that his best seasons in F1 have been his last 3 seasons in F1. I don't think at the moment there is any sign of regression whatsoever. So I don't think there's any reason for him to stop until at least there are a few signs that it's going to go downhill sooner rather than later. I don't think those signs are there yet. So I think he will stay in F1. I think he'll be in F1 for the next couple of years. He does have ambitions outside of Formula One, but inside Formula One, if he wants to direct change, which I believe he does, best place for him to do that while still winning at the same time is being a driver. Let's move back on to the race itself then. Driver of the day. Who have you got for this award, Harry?
A lot of contenders, I've got to say. Hamilton, an obvious one. Checo, because he's finally done what I've been asking him to do for 10 races. Got a podium. I'm going to give it to Sebi Vet because I've got a fond place for Sebi Vet in my heart. And that is undoubtedly his best drive of... bloody hell, I don't know. When was the last time he drove that well? Probably his win last year in Singapore. He a rocket launch start, and I think that Ferrari had more pace this weekend, as we saw, because Leclerc was fourth in the end, although that could have been the other way around. I do think the Ferrari had more pace on the slippy surface, but they had some. Vettel had some good pace, and he held off Hamilton for a long time in the middle part of the race, and I'm going to give it to him because good old Sebi Vet on the podium. You love to see it. But like I said, the top 3 definitely all contenders, and Leclerc, to be honest, because he came from the depths of the grid to come fourth and probably should have been third anyway. So, but yeah, Vettel for me.
Who have you got, Sam?
It's the same 3 for me. Checo Perez, it's so good to see that man standing on the podium. And in second as well, so regularly. When he has been on that podium, we see him in third. He's just kind of picking up the scraps, being opportunistic, making the most of it. And he's been so good at that over his career. But it's so nice to, you know what? I started in the front 3, and I finished in the front 3, and I made up a place. And he deserves that second place, and he deserves a seat in our sport next season. And if no one signs him, then what a calamity. What an absolute clanger someone's had if they don't pick up Sergio Perez, because he's shown once again that he is so worthy of being on the grid. He's so much better than so many drivers we have. They're all brilliant, but Perez is up there with the cream of the crop at the moment. He's so good. So Perez is up there for driver of the day. Hamilton, he was under pressure, but not under pressure at the same time. At one point, he was 25 seconds behind the race leader and then won the race by 25 seconds. Was just breathtaking. So I think Hamilton gets driver of the day for me. But as Harry said, Sebastian Vettel holds a very, very warm and special place in my heart. He's become this lovely, charming, funny guy. And to see him on the podium after what has been his drive of the season so far, and to see him just turn something around and to get one up on Charles Leclerc, who was a bit silly at the end and probably went for the last gasp, and I admire him for it, but also threw it away a little bit. It was good to see him on there, and he really deserves it. And maybe this might give him a little bit of a boost for the end of the season. Maybe it allows him just to smile his way through to Racing Point. I don't know. But it was absolutely great to see the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel on that podium, probably for the last time. Those 3 were just a league above. But, there were other great performances throughout, Charles Leclerc being one. But for me, those 3 were really up there.
Yeah, I'll give a quick shout out to Carlos Sainz. I think he had a really good race as well. He came from 14th on the grid, I believe. Didn't make any errors, at least that we saw on camera. He went through the field with relative ease, patience, and he was right in there with those guys up in P2 at the very end of the Grand Prix. So I think he deserves respect for that as well. I would agree with the names that you suggested. Perez kept his cool throughout the Grand Prix. Excellent tyre management, as we have become so accustomed to seeing. Sebastian Vettel, electric start. I don't think he had the pace of Leclerc throughout the Grand Prix, but that start was so crucial because with the way in which the field ended up, essentially, the gaps were massive after just a few laps, and Sebastian Vettel took real advantage of that great start. Charles Leclerc, so disappointed that he couldn't secure P2 at the end there because it was an incredible race from him. God Leclerc. I'm not going to renounce his God title, at least today, even with that poor finish with the last few corners because of how excellent he was prior to that. Not his best moment, but he retains the God Leclerc title for now. Sebastian, yeah, and he should have beaten Sebastian Vettel. Of course, he didn't. Lewis Hamilton claims it for me. As I said in the first few minutes of this podcast, it wasn't faultless. Did make a few errors, but crucially avoided any serious errors, as was the case with the likes of Max Verstappen. So, yeah, Lewis Hamilton for me. He won by over a pit stop when at a time he was behind the race leader by a pit stop. That's pretty incredible, regardless of what car you're in. Hamilton for me. Worst driver of the day. I feel like this could be a clean sweep, but we will see. Sam, who have you got?
Well, I'm going to shout out someone before we go into the depths, the dark, dark depths. Max Verstappen, mate, you threw that away. That was 100% yours to win. You had supreme pace. Your qualifying was just amazing until the GOAT scroll came and put you in the bins, Sonny. Honestly, that was like Max's heaven. And he turned it into an absolute living hell for himself. He span around more times than I can remember. Albon was better on the track than Max. Not faster, but better in the conditions. And I know my bold prediction was that Albon would beat Verstappen on raw pace, but I think Albon held himself up today. I still think it was bad that he finished behind Max after Max spun 3,000 times, but come on, Max. That was not good from you. It was rash. The first spin with Perez was poor. It was a silly, immature move, which you could have had on the next run if you just lifted slightly. I expect better from Max Verstappen now in his career. But the worst driver of the day is championship rival, the man that I think finished in, 14th or 15th place. He span at turn 1 more times than I've span on my office chair while being bored at work. Valtteri Bottas, mate, what are you doing? The fact that he wasn't even getting out of the way of Lewis Hamilton when he was getting lapped. He was getting lapped by his championship rival teammate, who then finishes 25 seconds clear of everyone else. Oh, God, Valtteri. I mean, I know there was nothing more that you could do, but surely there must have been something. Your teammate's winning by that margin. You were god-awful today. Bottas was so bad. So, yeah, Bottas, by far the worst driver of the day.
Unfortunately, Sam, you've brought up bold predictions, which is something I forgot about because, as I remember, and do correct me if I am wrong here, but I'm pretty sure someone predicted that both Alfa Romeos would make Q2.
Mate, now, people want to hear your worst drive of the day. You're going to bore everyone.
I just thought I would bring that up. But again, can't remember who made that prediction. Might have been me. Worst driver of the day, Harry. Who have you got?
You.
No, completely fair.
No, there's no looking past Walter. I'm afraid I don't know what happened. Before the start, Martin Brundle was like, "Oh yeah, people who drive on ice, and did rally,
Bottas and times he said that.
Bottas and Raikkonen." And they were both awful. I don't know. It's like his head dropped after the first spin, and then he decided he didn't do enough. Maybe he thought, well, that's championship gone, and now I'm going to do my Felipe Massa impression. I don't know. Not sure.
It was very good.
Yeah, it was close. Well, I said this to Ben before we started recording. He almost got the right amount. I think it was one short in the end of Massa 08, but never mind. Yeah, it was poor, and he obviously wasn't enjoying himself because they said 4 laps to go, and he said, "I wish it was less." And I'm sure he will just want to forget that race. But and I also agree with Sam on the Verstappen point. It was just frustrating because he clearly had the pace, he had the run, just filing behind through the one line corner in the wet, and wait till you get to a braking zone, Max. What are you doing, man? Also, I would have pooped myself if I'd had that spin, but
yeah,
fair enough that he didn't. He wasn't screaming still because I would be. That was terrifying.
Everyone's car was brown for the mud, but I wonder if Max's was a different colour for another reason. It's quite dirty out there.
And then when he's pulling back on the track, over the crest, I was like, oh no. Anyway, Bottas was by far and away the worst driver of the day.
Yeah, as expected, clean sweep on this one. And we brought up the Felipe Massa Silverstone 2008 comparison fairly early. For anyone who's unaware, Felipe Massa had an absolutely atrocious race when Lewis Hamilton won that Grand Prix, spun countless times. We made that prediction. We didn't make the prediction, but we made that assessment fairly early. Oh, he's going for this. He's going for Massa's record. But as the race unfolded, the more and more accurate it appeared because it just wasn't happening for him. Really confusing as to why, because like Martin Brundle did say about 264 times, he does have that experience of racing in these low grip conditions, and he just couldn't bring it in a Formula One car. And it's not as if those conditions changed massively from what we saw in qualifying. And in qualifying, at least until the final run in Q3, as is usually the case, Valtteri Bottas was on an identical pace to Lewis Hamilton. And in fact, I would say he was actually slightly better. He was marginally, every time you saw the two of them complete laps, it was Bottas a few tenths ahead. Yet when it came to today's race, we saw at one point when Valtteri stuck on new intermediate tyres versus Lewis Hamilton's tyres that had been going since 2003, that it was Lewis Hamilton who was not only faster. It's not as if Lewis Hamilton, he's just pipped it by a few tenths. There was one point where Lewis Hamilton was lapping 6 seconds faster. Like, it's two different worlds. Valtteri, this wasn't just the worst drive of the day. This might have been the worst drive of his career. If anyone can think of one that went worse, please do let me know. But yeah, no points whatsoever. And yeah, the question of whether he could keep the championship running for one more week, very conclusively answered. 3 out of 3 for worst driver of the day.
I've got breaking news. He did it. He spun 6 times.
Yeah!
Oh, congratulations, Walter.
You've won the Felipe Massa Award!
There you go.
Oh,
at least he won something.
That's what the interviewer said at the end when he did rock, paper, scissors with Ricardo. That was so savage. He walked up after doing rock, paper, scissors with Ricardo, and she went, well, at least you won that. How savage is that?
There's always next year.
Oh, dear.
We say hopefully. Moment of the race. Sam, what have you
got? By far, Lewis Hamilton crossing the line, hearing him almost feels like, crying in his crash helmet with his team giving him the plaudits. It was a special moment that you get to watch, and it won't come around very often. So for me, that was definitely the moment of the race. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment in history that will be remembered among Formula One fans, and he deserves every second of the praise he gets.
Harry, moment of the race?
Sam, I see your historic moment in F1 history, and I raise you a F-16 fighter jet scaring the living bejesus out of every driver on the grid.
I love that shot. That is great.
Such a good shot. Hard to argue with what Sam said. Another moment for me, I've already said it, is Vettel's start. I watched it on board just now, and it's Kimi Räikkönen Portimao-esque, but he did it within about a corner. So that's another top one for me.
And I'll go, just to offer up something different, I will say Perez versus Leclerc versus the other one, Vettel. I can remember his name. He's only won 4 championships.
What are you doing like that for?
Did anyone else notice the Mexican and German flag was the wrong way around, by the way, on the podium?
Yeah, Mexi-Vet
and Jeremy Perez.
Jeremy Perez. Oh dear.
I mean, he has been this year, for being honest.
He had COVID a long time ago, right? Yeah, I'll go with that battle. I thought for a moment that Lewis Hamilton crossing the line and winning the championship was going to mean that they weren't going to show it whatsoever, because that is a very F1 director thing to do. But fortunately, they did actually decide to show some on-track action, unbelievably, which is great. And yeah, Leclerc obviously not particularly happy about it, but it was excellent to watch. And let's leave that one there then. Istanbul, well done. No Baku to say well done to this year. So it's Istanbul in its place. Its location not too far away. So we'll give it to you this year. And who knows? Maybe it can make an appearance in 21. We still do have that TBC. For this podcast, Sam, if you wouldn't mind getting us out of here.
Folks, it's been a historic Grand Prix weekend. It's been a moment that will go down in history. as the time where 6 Grand Prix drivers all nearly pooped themselves when an F16 flew over the top. Oh, and Lewis Hamilton matched Michael Schumacher's record. Let us know what you think about the race. Let us know what is Lewis Hamilton's best moment. Let us know if Perez should go in that seat instead of Albon, or where Albon should go. Should he go back to AlphaTauri or go out completely? Will it be too harsh? It would be very interesting to hear what you think. Videos on YouTube will be out. Comment down there on your points of view, or get over to Twitter at @LBreaking. It would be great to always hear from you. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
I've been Ben Hawking.
And I've been Harry Eid.
And remember, keep breaking light.